Hello everyone, welcome to today's webinar. Thank you very much for setting aside some time to be with us today. As you'll see from your screen, today's webinar is around Google My Business, and it's a kind of deep dive Q&A with four incredible panelists who are all here in attendance, and we're very excited to have them. We've got Mike Blumenthal, Joy Hawkins, Joel Headley, and Ben Fisher. All of these four panelists are Google top contributors, which means they have a deep knowledge around Google My Business and Google Local and all things related. Joel, in fact, spent 11 years working at Google, so hopefully he can share an insider's view to some of the questions that we're going to tackle today. Speaking of questions, we actually had over 130 questions sent in by people, which is an awful lot. And what I've agreed with the panelists is, because we can't answer 130 questions in the time that we've got today, is that we're actually going to do two separate webinars so that we can get through them all. We're going to do today's webinar, which is all going to be around troubleshooting GMB issues, and then the guys have agreed to do a second webinar next week on Thursday, which is looking at strategy and ranking factors for Google My Business, and that's going to be at 1 p.m. EST, so a slightly earlier time next week. And that will allow us to answer more questions in more detail and give all the listeners lots of really interesting tips, advice, and insights to help them in their work. So that's the way it's going to work across the two webinars. Today's one is looking at troubleshooting of GMB issues. And this is the agenda that we're going to cover today. We're going to look at penalties first, then we're going to look at spam and reporting and troubleshooting, then the verification issues, merging and claiming listings, and multi-location issues. If anyone wants to tweet any of this or start a kind of conversation on Twitter, we set up this hashtag GMB webinar. Please use that. It's a unique hashtag. It's been set up for today, and we'll be monitoring that throughout the session and also afterwards. If anyone has any audio issues as you go, wants to kind of post any questions, please use the question module within the GoToWebinar control panel. We've got a couple of people monitoring that from this end and answering questions as much as they can do. The webinar is being recorded, so if you have to duck off early, you'll be able to kind of catch up on the full session tomorrow once we have downloaded the recording, edited it, and uploaded it to various video channels, but also be available on the BrightLocal blog. Okay, so without further ado, let's have a look at the first questions that we've got. And the first section is on penalties. And the first question is, what is the quickest way to get a suspended listing reinstated? And I'm going to throw that over to Ben to get us started. So Ben, what's your answer to this particular question?
All right, thanks, Myles. Well, I'd say that, I mean, it's one of the more common questions that we get in the forums. It's definitely true. And it really depends on I think the suspension type. You've got two types of suspensions that you're looking at. One is called the soft suspension. This is when you can clearly see it's a soft suspension when it looks like the listing is unverified on maps. So you basically have to claim this listing. And also you've gotten a suspension notice within Google My Business, red stripe across the top. In this case, you basically could go ahead and claim the listing within a new Google account and just basically go through the verification process. Basically, you need to ensure that you meet all of the guidelines. Like, for instance, one of the common ones is hiding your business address and making yourself a service area business if you are a service area business. Or you can always come to the forums and ask a top contributor to look at your listing, see if there's any kind of other issues, and then we could possibly escalate it from there. The second type is more of a hard suspension. And this is when your listing is completely removed from apps. You do a search for your business name, it is just not there on the right-hand side at all. This is because basically Google, a user, or basically something, the algorithm has decided that the business listing is just not eligible to be on Google Maps anymore, and therefore it's gone. There's a couple ways that you can get those. One of those, and probably the most common, is if you're using a PO box for your address or a virtual office. Maybe you have multiple listings for your same business. That's a common mistake. Sometimes it's done intentionally, sometimes unintentionally. Another one would be is if you're an online-only business, basically you're e-commerce, but you're trying to look like a local storefront. And if you've also created, say, a business inside of another business and you're trying to act as if you have a storefront there, but really all you do is you're just offering that service. It's like maybe it's not a kiosk, basically. Basically, what you don't want to do is, when you, in any of these cases, is you don't want to create a new listing. You want to request a I'm sorry, in the case of a hard suspension, you don't want to create a new listing. You want to request a reinstatement. That's if you're applying with the guidelines. And in either one of these cases, of course, you can always come to the forums and ask TCs for help.
Okay, that's great, Ben. Thank you for kicking us off. That was incredibly detailed. Mike, do you have anything you might want to add to what Ben said?
There is a third scenario that isn't well communicated when when a listing is claimed in 2 accounts and both accounts haven't approved the other as the owner, and one of those accounts gains precedence. Secondary account gets suspended. It's actually a suspended account, not a suspended listing, but the messaging doesn't make really a distinction. In that case, you have to, if you go out and you find that the listing is still verified, it means that somebody else currently is the owner, and you have to figure out who that is. And that relates to a question that comes later in terms of re-requesting access to it. But it means you don't have adequate privileges. So.
Okay, great. Thanks, Mike. Joy, I guess a follow-on question for you from that. What advanced options are open to businesses if the usual steps don't work? If someone is feeling that they've tried all these avenues, they should legitimately be displayed, but they can't get it, what else can they try?
So one of the major things that I noticed is a lot of people that get the responses from Google for reinstatement requests, they kind of get these like canned responses that basically just tell them your listing violated the guidelines. They don't clarify what guidelines the user actually broke. So a lot of times it's like they're spinning, kind of going around in circles, trying to figure out which guideline it is that they need to fix. So I would say start by going on the Google My Business forum and asking peers on there like what the issue is that got them suspended, because often third parties like the people on the panel here can look at the situation and say what the solution would be. Another option obviously is to hire someone to analyze or look at the situation to figure out what the issue is, because if you can't actually identify or solve the issue, you're not going to have much luck getting it reinstated.
Yeah, that's kind of a very good point. I mean, is there, in terms of escalation opportunities, within kind of Google? I mean, maybe this is a good one to kind of bring to Joel into, as he's got some insider view on that point. Is there any way to kind of escalate things beyond, the sort of standard sort of support team at Google?
Yeah, the best escalation options, really beyond the normal support ways, are actually using the forum. Because if you're using the social channel or directly to the support team, if they're unhelpful, you're kind of stuck until someone can make a real human argument for you. And so if you get Joy's ear or Ben's or mine's or Mike's or somebody else on the forum, that can be super helpful, because we have a way to talk with the team, and we look at issues before we escalate them. They trust us to do that, so we understand usually the entire scope of the problem and are able to communicate in a way that speaks to the team, and they get things done faster, which is nice.
Okay, that's great. Is there any, is there any kind of advice around the sort of language or tone that should be used? If someone, this is a real frustration for people, right? They get so, they think they're doing things correctly, they follow the guidelines, and still they can't get the thing unstuck and unpenalized. Any advice on, language, sort of tone? Should they be pleading? Should they, the threats work? What's your, how do you kind of see the attitude that someone has affecting the
What
situation?
did Joe Friday say? Just the facts, ma'am.
Yes. So we'll often get a post in the forum that's like, help, something's going wrong. I've done everything I can possibly do. Can someone help me? And it doesn't have the address, the website, the phone number, and the listing, the link to the listing. And it's like, would love to help. What's the actual problem? So I think of it as just a standard bug report. What you see and what you expect, and what are the steps to reproduce that, right? And if you come in with, like Mike said, just the facts, it's much easier to ascertain the problem and try to come up with a resolution.
And as far as tone, remember that we're all volunteers, and we do this out of goodwill and aspiration for the business, and we're just messengers. We can't control the machine or the people behind the machine, and so ranting doesn't help anybody.
That is very useful advice. Thanks for that. That's will make things very clear for people. Okay, let's go to the next one. If Google won't restore a listing, should we create a new one? And how do we avoid getting suspended again? Why don't we send that one to Ben?
Okay. I'm going to actually answer this really short, and that is if you can't get it restored, no, do not create a new one. That will just cause more problems than anything else. How to not get a suspension again if you do get reinstated is just make sure you're following the guidelines more than anything else. But I definitely want to pass over to Joy for some more information on that.
Yeah, so I actually had a case, an example where someone actually did this. So in this case, it was a hard suspension. There was a business in Denver that wanted to be listed in Denver, but they were actually in a suburb of Denver. So they just decided to use a virtual office, get a listing set up in Denver. They had tons of reviews, ranked really well. Google suspended the listing. It was removed. All the reviews disappeared with it. The business owner obviously didn't quite get the reason why they got suspended, so they just decided to get a new address and recreate the listing and create, I think they got like 20 new reviews, and like probably 4 or 5 months later it started ranking really high and a competitor noticed it, reported it, and literally they're back to the same exact scenario they were in last year where the listing is now gone. So no, even if it works for like a short period of time, they didn't actually fix the issue. They, instead of using a virtual office, decided to use a little tiny office that they were never located at, such as Lockdale Bay. And yeah, Google didn't have too much of an issue removing the listing once the competitor reported it. So
yeah, just to follow on that, when often when people are trying to restore a suspended listing, it's at the same address. And we have to remember that Google My Business is just a collection of data to stick into the local index, which is a broader collection of data. So if you try to create a new listing under a new account, maybe even throwing a new suite number or something like that, at the same location with the same phone number, what happens is that Google says, okay, I'm going to look up everything that's at that location before. Does it kind of match? Yes. Okay, that listing was suspended. We will persist the suspension, regardless of whether or not that new listing is actually following the guidelines in a more specific way than the old listing. If it gets properly matched, the suspension will carry over to that new listing. So they're matching against an already existing index that has a notation on that listing that there was spam. And they're just looking for matches. And if that matches up, they're going to persist that suspension. So it's no use. You really got to fix what you have there, not try to create a new.
And Joel and I had this conversation the other day. Google never throws any data away. They keep it forever.
Okay, so essentially you've basically got to go and fix the issue with the existing listing. If you create up a new listing, it'll either just get rejected immediately or the penalty will be extended across it. Or if you do manage to get another address, it'll catch up with you in time, and all that effort you go to creating reviews, etc., will be lost again. Is kind of the message. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Great. Really good answers. Thanks, guys. Okay. This is the final question in the kind of penalties section, and let's come back over to Joy. So Google's really focusing on spam in certain industries. One of the ones that was mentioned by people who submitted their question was rehab centers. I think 3 people were working with businesses in this particular industry, and I guess sort of some questions that sort of fell out of that was what other industries are they also focusing on? Why do they focus on certain industries? What is it about them? And what can legitimate businesses within these industries do to ensure they don't get kind of caught up in the sort of spam or activities of the businesses that are being penalized by Google?
So I'd say Google's focusing on the industries that they're launching home service ads in. I really do think home service ads are kind of their solution to the spam problem, because it removes any listing from the local results that doesn't have a storefront, so that instantly nukes the majority of the lead generating listings or duplicate listings that people are using home addresses for. So that would be probably locksmiths, towing companies, plumbing, electricians. Usually it is home-based businesses or any type of business that doesn't have to do business at the location. So I see it even like in the insurance space or attorneys, because the customer doesn't actually have to show up at a specific location, so it's easy for people to fake an address. As far as the second part of the question, what legitimate businesses should do, I would stress that even every home-based business should look at the possibility of converting to a storefront. There is actually a way for a home-based business to convert to a storefront if they have proper permanent signage on their lawn saying that they have a business there. Google's okay with that, and they're okay with them showing the address. I strongly suggest that just because I think home service ads are expanding pretty quickly, and even if they're not in your market yet, they probably will be at some point.
Okay, thanks, Joy. Joel, anything you might want to add to that? And also, I guess rehab centres don't fall into that type of kind of service area business. So why are they getting caught up in the spam at the moment?
Yeah. So it's correct that Google looks at industry by industry, and that's really just for facility of doing spam finding. So there's two teams. There's one team that moderates and looks at all the edits that are coming in, and if those come up with certain categories where there's lots of edits happening, then there's a second spam team that says, okay, how can we solve this in a much more scalable way? And most of the edits that come in for businesses that can be good lead generators end up to being super spammy. So they go to a new team that then sets up all these automatic rules to take down listings that they think might be spammy. So that's why they focus on certain industries, because they can do industry-specific verification methods, whether it's looking at a locksmith association to understand if it's a real locksmith that's registered, or doing some other specific industry things to take down listings in a mass way. That said, they're always looking at spam that's reported across the index, but that's why they look at certain industries. And as a result, if you want to be careful about getting caught up in that kind of thing, you should try to be a member of the professional organizations that are typically recognized in your industry. That can really help too. It helps not just to not get suspended, but also for other SEO reasons. So looking to be part of your community and part of the professional, well-recognized organizations in your industry can help.
Yeah, as well as providing kind of just general kind of credibility for the sort of service you provide. That makes a lot of sense. By the way, Joy also mentioned kind of home service ads. In next week's webinar, we're going to look at kind of pay to play as one of the kind of strategy pieces that people can utilize to kind of get ranking in certain locations in certain industries. Okay, that's brilliant, guys. So again, thank you for that. Let's move on to the second section, which is about spam reporting and troubleshooting, which does segue nicely on from penalties. The first question is, and I'm going to send this one, well, it's back to you, Joy. What is the most effective way to report spam listings to get them removed?
So I'd say like two things here. First is I would strongly suggest, if you don't already, make sure you're submitting regular edits on Google Maps to listings. That will help build your authority over time so that you yourself can get rid of spam listings. I've been doing this for years. Back when MapMaker was a thing, I was heavily involved in reviewing edits that other people had made, as well as making my own edits. I have a really high trusted profile, which makes a lot of my edits just go through right away when I'm reporting spam, which is excellent. Most people are not in that boat because they don't spend enough time making edits in the community and reviewing edits that other people have made through Check the Facts on Map. So I would definitely suggest that you start doing that. But if you're not at that level yet, which I'm guessing a huge majority of people aren't, the best way to kind of get rid of spam is to either report it on the Google My Business forum or send it directly to Google via Twitter or Facebook. Google My Business is on both of those channels, and you can submit a spam report to them. I'll put in there that it's really important to really clarify why it's spam. A lot of people just say, like, oh, this listing's spam, and they expect Google to be able to kind of connect the dots. You need to really be clear, say, hey, this company has another listing, it's over here, or, you can see on their logo, this is not actually their business name, their keyword stuffing. The more detail you provide, the better.
Right. So again, the facts are the kind of key part there. Make it easy for the team there to review it. Do all maybe this is a question for Joel. Do all kind of spam report listings get read by an individual, or is there some sort of methodology for kind of bucketing them together? And once there's a certain number of spam listings or a certain number of reports about a particular listing being spam, it then gets looked at? Yeah.
Everything is what I would call moderated, but sometimes it's automatically moderated, and sometimes it's moderated by a human. So as Joy mentioned, because she's made a lot of edits and her profile has a rich history, part of those edits is also that some of those edits have been moderated by a human at Google, and they agree with Joy's assessment, and they've gone live. As a result, Joy's profile is well trusted, because they've been verified by other humans that Google also trusts, right? People that work for them. So there are lots of machine actions that happen after a manual report is submitted, but most of those are happening on profiles that are well trusted. And I would say there's another way to get things removed, and I think Mike is probably most effective about this, but if there's a widespread problem, getting publicity makes Google jump on things fairly quickly.
Sad but true.
So essentially, if you kind of raise it publicly on a blog or any sort of Facebook and Twitter channels, that's more likely going to get them to kind of jump on it with quicker than they would do otherwise.
If it gets into mainstream media, actually, is where it's going to really get the attention. Even if that mainstream media is local.
Okay, that's great. So there's other opportunities kind of going outside the official channels to get Google to kind of take notice. Great to understand about the I guess the kind of mechanized approach, as well as how to kind of get your own profile up to that kind of trusted status. Certainly, if you're working in this industry for a long time, it's a really good thing to invest time and effort in doing.
When you come to the forums with it, it really helps the TCs if you have all the links there so we can quickly get to them. And the other thing that helps is if it is part of a larger scale issue, i.e. multiple iterations, those are reports that Google will prioritize in our manual process as opposed to the one-offs, right? They're looking from a systemic point of view to hit the really large spam networks, and so if you can bring multiple instances where this shows across multiple markets, that really gets people's attention on the Google side.
Yeah, and I think I've talked to Mike about this before, but if something is never really seen by people and you have one person that reported something wrong, Google will also prioritize requests based on the frequency of impressions that a certain listing gets. So if a listing is really not seen in search, certainly in categorical search, it may be difficult through a one-off process to get it actioned through a generic report, for example, to get that action. So that's why you kind of have to escalate sometimes. It's not because they didn't get the report, it's because they don't look at the report because it's so low value to them, they don't care.
Okay, that kind of makes sense, Chief. Okay, so let's see the next question, and again, maybe John, maybe we'll stay with you on this one. When is it right to flag a spam listing as never existed versus spam versus duplicate, and how does Google treat these differently?
So I usually use never existed for most of the cases. I use it for virtual offices. When I use spam is generally if it's like a second listing or 3 listings or 4 listings that the same business set up and they have keywords as the business name, and it's blatant spam, like it's very obvious. Spam and never existed technically do the same thing. If approved, it actually removes the listing entirely from Google Maps. So that's generally what you would want to do if it's a non-eligible listing. I think where people go wrong is they see keyword stuffing on a listing and they flag the listing as spam, which is incorrect. This would actually result in your edit getting denied. What you should do instead is edit the business name and correct it. The duplicate option on Google Maps is like a useless, vacant hole. I never use it. I don't think it works. If it does work, I'm not really sure what exactly it does, so I would never use that option for anything.
Okay, just to kind of just to recap then, Joy, if you see a business name thing is incorrect, you think rather than reporting it as spam, you should actually edit the listing and submit that as a change request. But what happens if that business doesn't actually exist at all? If it's just a completely fictional business, you'd report that as never existed.
If it's completely fictional, like it's a lead generating company, definitely I would use spam in that case. I use never existed if the address isn't real, so like a virtual office or sometimes a UPS store, if it's just like a plumber, for example, that used the UPS store, I've used never existed. Spam I try to use if it's like, okay, it's blatant spam. Like this person knows what they're doing and it's spam.
Okay, great, thank you. Joel, anything you want to add to that?
Yeah, in terms of how Google treats them differently, the treatment is in terms of just how the listing is ultimately marked. But when a manual review comes in to look at whether it's never existed spam or duplicate, the manual review's task is to say, is this listing factually correct in any case? So in any case, when you're reporting information and it goes through a human review, the human review is checking if the listing is factually correct. And if they find it to be factually correct, and they bias towards information that already is there, they'll leave as is. If they don't, they'll make a change. They'll moderate that change, and like Joy said, the impact will happen. Duplicate used to work, so I don't know what happened there, but that was the breakdown was after my time there.
I'm sure it coincided with you leaving as well.
Yeah.
Is there any kind of sort of severity scale? Is like never existed, less severe than spam versus less severe than kind of duplicate, or does it all essentially kind of go through with the same priority?
No, it all has a similar impact on terms of the listing visibility. If you have something, like Joy said, never existed is really for mistakes. Spam is for people doing terrible things. And they may use the signals for the spam marks to go back to that spam specific team to help them understand where they see spam, where spam is happening on maps. So it can feed back into the larger scale efforts.
Okay, great, guys. Thank you. That's a really detailed response. Let's go on to the next one. This question, I think Ben, let's put this over to you. Why do companies with either a service term or a location within their business name still rank high? And should people still be doing this to get quick wins? Or is the kind of the day of reckoning coming?
It's a great question. I think we all have a lot of different varying viewpoints on this. The way I look at it is this: if we all remember back in the day when there were exact match domain names, and you put a keyword in your domain name, it would help you rank higher, right? It actually kind of still works to this very day. When you do put your service type or your city type into your Google My Business listing, it is a fact. It is going to help you rank higher. Should you do this? The answer is really no. You shouldn't do it because it is against the guidelines. But there's kind of a double-edged sword to this. If you do it, are you really going to get penalized? Are you going to get your business listing shut down completely? And the answer to that is, at this time, probably not. Will people go in and edit it? Yes. Do those edits stick? Well, unfortunately, the answer is usually not, because it shows up that somebody has made that change in your Google My Business dashboard, and you can just go ahead and deny that. So again, short answer is should you do it for a quick win? No. Can you do it? Of course you can. But I think there's one other aspect too that needs to be looked at, and is if you have a Google My Business listing and it's XYZ, Fisher Plumbing, and I want to go ahead and add my city name to it because I think that's going to help me rank better in my city. Well, one thing that I've just done now is I've messed up all of my citations because all of my citations said Fisher's Plumbing. So now what you have to do is if you want to make it all line up correctly, you've got to go out, you've got to fix all of your citations everywhere. You might even want to make the change with the Secretary of State, but then what happens again if somebody goes ahead and corrects it? Now everything's all messed up. So basically, yes, could you get a quick win? Sure. But in the long run, you're shooting yourself in the foot.
That's an excellent answer. Mike, can you add to that?
Sure. One, if you add one or two words to the end of your business name, the fact of the matter is Google still will resolve that against your citations with reasonable accuracy because of the broad matching capability of their algorithm. But I think the issue is even bigger than what Ben talks about. To me, one of the core pieces of equity that a business owns is their brand, right? And their brand is effectively represented in local by their name as well as what they stand for. And I think that, anytime you start futzing with your business name, you start futzing with confusion in the marketplace that maybe leads to what Ben says, which is citation confusions, but more importantly, it might lead to client confusion. I really think that a business should view their brand and their name as a strong statement about who they are, what they do. If you're going to change your name one place, then take the time to think through the process, change your name offline and on, become that business, and then do a citation campaign that you can live with for the next 5 or 10 or 15 years because your name is really your sort of entree to the marketplace. So putzing with it makes absolutely no sense to me from a long-term marketing perspective unless you're going to commit to a new name. And it's not about gaming Google, it's about winning with customers in the end.
If a business has multiple old listings, should we select permanently closed, or is there a better way to remove these listings? Joy, why don't you pick that up?
Yeah, so just like they said earlier, there actually isn't a way really to remove data from Google. Google stores it. You also can't get a listing deleted if it ever existed at a specific place. So the only time they ever really remove it from maps is if it's incorrect and the business never actually existed there. I would say the one exception to that rule is if you have a service area business, so a home-based business, that exists on Google Maps but was never verified, so it's not claimed, it's not owned. According to Google Maps rules, it actually shouldn't be on Maps at all. So those listings can be removed. There's only exception there. But if you have a listing at an old address that used to be at some point and then you moved, having it permanently closed means that it'll still rank and it'll still show up when people are searching for your brand. So what you actually would want to do is reach out to Google support and ask them to mark it as moved. Marking it as moved is kind of like a 301 redirect. It doesn't actually remove the listing, but it causes it to not show up anywhere. And instead, Google will show the correct page that exists at your current location. So very similar to like if you move domain names, you get a new domain and you 301 the old one, it works the same way.
Okay, that's great. I think that's probably it kind of covers off that pretty succinctly. So thanks, Joy. Final question in this section is: what's the best way to combat obvious fake reviews on either your client's page if someone's putting a malicious review there, or a fake positive review on a competitor's GMB page? Mike, with all your involvement and knowledge around GMB and reviews, it seems obvious to come to you first.
So again, it's an issue. There's several issues. I mean, the standard pathway is to report it via the flag on the review, wait 2 weeks, and then escalate it either through the social media channels of Google and or through the forum. The one-offs, the single reviews, are going to be hard to get taken down if they don't violate the terms of service. And the terms of service don't assess whether the review is true, real or not. They assess whether the words in it violate some guideline, like does it swear, is it racist, is whatever. So typically flagging it if it doesn't violate one of those guidelines won't result in it being taken down. It's very hard to get it taken down unless it does. So go read the reviews TOS. And you're not going to have a whole lot more success in the forum with those kinds of one-offs. On the other hand, if you can identify that that review is part and parcel of a larger pattern of abuse, i.e. that reviewer has reviewed the same kind of fake service businesses in 47 locations in 10 countries, and that reviewer is associated with 3 other reviewers who have the same behavior, then you're likely seeing a review spam network. And then it behooves you to spend a little bit of time researching it, bringing that data into the forum and asking the forum members to escalate it. Then, you know, it's more likely to get taken down, even if the reviews are in compliance with the terms of service. It will force Google to take another look at the reviews and the reviewers, and hopefully then they'll get taken down.
Okay, great. Joel, can you add to that?
Can I add one more thing on that? If you discover what you think is a network, send it my way. Mike at get5stars.com. I have a tool that actually analyzes network relationships and reviews, and I can sort of make a quick assessment of it. So feel free to send me an email, and I will look at it and let you know if I think it is part of a larger network, and I'll try to get you the data back, and you can then report it in the forum.
Okay. Is that that's a pretty cool tool, Mike? Is that something that's available for others, or is that something that
it isn't? It isn't available, unfortunately. It's just something I crafted when I started spending so much time looking at these review relationships. I had a friend who was willing to code it, so I'd be glad to share it with you privately.
I'd love to see it. That would be great. I think it sounds incredibly sort of valuable to help people kind of get on top of spam. I think the more people identifying these networks, you know, the less impact they're going to have, and everyone will stop doing it so much. So that's great, Mike. Thanks. Joel, would you like to kind of give us your view on this?
Yeah, I think Mike covered very well how to combat fake reviews. I want to emphasize one, that when you do a single report, the flag a review as being incorrect, what you're doing is giving that review text to an individual, and they review the text of the review, just like Mike said. So they're looking at that content and deciding if it's fake. They're not seeing if they were a disgruntled employee. They don't look at the profile, so they can't tell if that was a disgruntled employee unless they say that. They can't tell that they've made 300 reviews on plumbers across 50 states in our nation. They can't figure that out, right? So they're only looking at text. As a result, when you're trying to look at networks, you have to escalate via a different course. Also, Google defines a review, someone qualifying to leave a review, as someone who has an experience with the business. We often see businesses coming in and saying, hey, this person was a jerk and I didn't even serve them. Why do they have a right to review my business? Well, that's an experience, so they do. Hey, I have an employee that's upset, and they actually say that in the review. In some ways, that's an experience with the business. So there's lots of ways that you can think about. I have a supplier that's mad at me, right? They were never my customer. Why should they be able to review me? Again, that's an experience with the business. So they're pretty broad, and this goes to like the view of free speech in the U.S., really allowing as much as possible and only taking down where it's really, really clear there's a violation. So the default is to leave up.
Which does raise the question of legal recourse. It's more, in the United States we have a very loose regulatory environment. It's very difficult to prove defamation. It is possible, and in some egregious cases, it's appropriate to take it through the courts in the United States. But in the United States, at least, very, very difficult to get a review taken down. That's not as true in England or Australia, where the libel laws are a little more in favor of the business, and it may warrant the risk you run as a business of taking it through legal is cost, and the other is reputation. If you've misjudged the situation, it could blow up in your face and you become the laughingstock of the internet, right? So you might just be better off if it's a one-off, just going forward, asking your clients to review you and trying to bury that single fake review or bad review or untrue review.
Joel, you mentioned earlier that Google has essentially manually looks at trends within listings to identify kind of commonalities from spammy listings. Does it have any kind of algorithms or sort of systems in the back end to look at sort of what constitutes fake reviews and to detect patterns and therefore apply an automated logic to removing them?
The answer is yes, but Mike wouldn't think so. So it's yes, but it's,
no, I think so. I just think it's unsophisticated. That's all.
Yeah, it's very rudimentary, and I don't think they've focused on really developing those beyond what the spammers have devised on how to do it today. So Google needs to put 3 engineers on this project and have them focus 100%.
For 3 days.
Have them focus for at least a quarter, 100%. Or probably all time, because spammers will think new ways, and I don't think they're doing that today. If they are, if you're a Google employee and you do focus on review spam as an engineer, not as a search quality rater, let me know. I'd be curious to talk to you and see what you're actually doing.
As would I.
It seems like such an important thing for them to focus on. So I hope they do that. And they might have a couple of other engineers knocking around in Google buildings. So. Okay, great. Let's go to the next bit, which is looking at verification issues. Let's bring Ben back in to answer this. Is there a way to get access or control of GMB listings created by ex-employees or marketeers who no longer work for the company?
Yeah, this is a big problem. I'm going to start off by giving a tip to everybody on how you may not ever, how you can prevent yourself from running into this issue in the first place. And that is when you are creating your Google My Business listing, try to always use your domain name as an email at your domain name as the primary owner. Even if a marketing company is setting it up, they should still assign you with an email at your domain name as the primary owner. That way, any communications are going to come to you first, even if you don't, say it's not your email address, but it's an employee. You'll always get control. So to get to the answer, answering the question, is there a way to get access to it if an ex-employee or a marketer who no longer works for the company? The answer is yes. So the first thing that you can do is you can just go into Google My Business, try to add the business as a new location. It's a little bit more complicated with service area businesses, but let's just say it's a local storefront. You go ahead, add it. As you're adding it, it's going to say, well, somebody that's already owned. Basically, it's going to say you want to request ownership as a manager or an owner. Google's going to go ahead and send them an email, basically, reach out to the current owner. They have 7 days, basically, to respond. If they don't respond, then it's going to go ahead and they're going to go ahead and release it to you. If it is or it will get denied by the existing owner. Now, during this process, the little box is going to come up that's going to show a partial bit of a hint of what email address actually has the ownership. It'll show the first 2 characters, then *** at whatever.com, for instance. Make sure you take a screenshot of that, because that's going to at least give you a hint as to who it might be very specifically, and then you can use that in your communications. Because if it fails, then you're going to have to come to the forums or go to the Google social channels, and you're going to have to say, okay, well, this person is the one who has the ownership access. Here is my, and what you need is you'll need proof, basically, that either the marketing agency or the ex-employee no longer works for your company. And at that point, Google's going to be able to help you, or one of the TCs will be able to escalate it for you.
Okay, great. Mike, anything else to add to that?
I think this issue is more problematic, or should be less problematic going forward, because the ownership privileges that Google now allows to be assigned are more sophisticated. This was a particular problem in the past because only one person could own or manage a listing, or if you're a manager, you didn't have the same privileges as owners. Now you can have dual owners, for example. So, so in addition to Ben's suggestion that you use your domain name, which I think is domain email, you also want to be sure that you might want to share ownership privileges with somebody else, but you want to be sure that you have them yourself. And then finally, as Ben pointed out, sometimes if you can ferret out the email address, it can be a cordial interaction with that person to get control. It's just a lack of communication. They forgot that they were managing the listing, and all you need to do is reach out to them, or maybe it's your email that you forgot about. You need to reopen that email and check it, right? So there could be some less egregious reason why you can't get control, and it could be you.
Okay. But an obvious way for people who don't currently have this issue is to make sure that they kind of activate that kind of joint, that sort of mutual ownership. How many owners can you have for one listing, by the way?
A lot.
Yeah, a lot.
Okay. Okay. So that's one way to kind of protect yourself moving forward.
Well, it's not full protection because the other person can un-own you, I think. The other owner can un-own you. So you really have to have trust with anybody you're going to become co-owners with, but for sure the business owner should be the owner. If he makes somebody else a manager, then he controls it. But if you're going to co-share ownership, as a minimum, you want to really trust the other party because they can shut you out. So you don't want to share it too broadly.
Okay, great. Let's go to the next question. We've got about sort of 10 minutes, so we're trying to see if we're probably going to run over a little bit, guys, I'm afraid. So I hope that doesn't affect too many people's calendars, but we're getting some great juicy advice here. Final question in this section is, so we've got too much. A client has several locations. Some are correctly set up as service areas, while others are with storefront address. If we change the storefronts to service areas, does Google require re-verification?
Who are you asking?
Mike, let's go with you.
Oh, okay. The answer is no. You can change the service area without re-verification. The whole service area, I mean, for me, the issue is obviously always claiming for sustainability, you want to be sure that you claim to be what you really are and are what you claim to be. That's a sustainable strategy with Google. The problem going forward with service area business, as Joy pointed out earlier, is that if many of those categories are pushed into the HSA world, the home service ad world, then they don't get any, they get much less free exposure, and it's going to become pay to play. So you really want to consider whether you really are storefront or not. If you are, and if you can substantiate that, I think first choice is to become storefront and stick with it. Obviously, the other issue is, if you go service area, you raise Google looks closely, and they have to be real locations within that context. Google doesn't allow service area businesses to be too close to each other. Like you could have one in California and one in Texas, but you certainly can't have two in the same town, so you might trigger spam things. So the first issue to me is try to understand what your business is, represent it that way, and not think about it in terms of gaming the system so that you have a sustainable project here. The answer is no to the question.
Okay, great. And let's just, for the sake of time, jump to the next question. I've used my phone number to verify multiple GMB listings. Now Google says I've used my number too many times. What's the best option for getting around? And Joy, why don't you pick that up?
Yeah, I shockingly hear this question a lot, which surprises me. I remember like 5 or 6 years ago, the agency that I worked for would do this to set up a new account for a business. But we quickly realized this is not a good idea. For example, if you work in an agency and you use one of your staff members' cell phone numbers, what happens when they quit or leave? You're pretty much screwed trying to get into the account. So I always suggest using the business owner's cell phone number or primary phone number when you're setting up the Google account. That way they have full control and access, and you're not going to run into verification issues down the line. Also, you really shouldn't be setting up Gmail accounts. You should be putting it in a Google account that uses the business owner's primary email. That way they will get notifications about important things like reviews, edits to the listing, and other items that they should get emails from. So I honestly would never use your own phone number when setting up a listing for a client.
Okay. Ben, anything else to add to Joy's comments?
Actually, no. Joy answered that perfectly.
Okay, great. Let's move on to the fourth section, which is around merging and claiming listings. We've got a couple of questions in this particular section. The first one is, if a business rebrands and/or moves, is it better to update the existing GMB listing or shutter it and create a new one? And why don't we, as Joy answered the last one, Mike, why don't we go to you first on this one?
Well, firstly, I think rebranding and moving requires good planning, and it's a complicated thing in terms of Google, so I don't believe it's just a Google question. Obviously, I think you need to address it at a bigger level across all of your memberships, across your certifications, across your citations. I think it needs to be a scaled, planned effort and can't just happen willy-nilly at Google, first issue. Correct me if I'm wrong, Joy, but my sense is that in the end, you want that moved redirect. So the easiest way to get that is by changing it in the GMB, letting Google decide whether they're going to give you a closed listing, but that will also flag it so it gets that moved redirect automatically. But if you change it in the GMB and go back and find the other listing not closed after you've moved, then you do need to close it and then request the moved redirect from support. And Joy might have more to add to that.
Yeah, like Mike said, I think the only exception would be if they move far away. So, you know, if you're moving from like Florida to Utah, you do not want to update the dashboard. It would be kind of a nightmare. If you're just moving, you know, across town or maybe the next city over, I would update the address in Google My Business because then you keep all the reviews as well.
Right, Google's done a better job of mapping the new location to the old location. I did a move the other day and it was really smooth. And no change in rank, just happened. It was really, they've gotten a lot better at it than in the past. Kudos to Google.
How does that work on a rebrand then? If I got a friend of mine who runs he's kind of personal trainer. He's setting up a kind of a new business. He's essentially rebranding from his current business to the new one, staying within the same town, but he's also moving location at the same time. What complications is he going to expect when he does that? And you know, should he just simply because it's in the same town, is it best for him to just update his existing GMB listing?
He may be forced to re-verify regardless, right? If there's enough changes in the name and the location, he may be forced to re-verify again. You want to be looking at it from the context of the total ecosystem. I think it's a case-by-case question. How different? What is in a different category? How far is he moving? How much is his name changing? But if it's nearby and if it isn't a big change, I'd do it in the GMB and then watch the index for errors. If it's a big change, I'd probably, depending on what the business is doing, I'd probably, again, I may still do it through the GMB and then just not worry so much if the other one shows as closed and doesn't get redirected. Really depends on what they're trying to do.
The context around why Google wants to maybe close a listing and open a new one is they want the experience. If there's a substantially different experience, then they feel like the old listing should be closed and a new listing should be created. So if the rebrand includes new product lines or a new type of service or new people, right? Well, often a restaurant might rebrand and the question is, hey, are we just changing the name or are we getting a new chef and a new house manager that's really going to change the experience at the restaurant? Then Google kind of expects that old listing to be closed and the new brand to have a new listing so that the reviews and all the comments about that old listing stay with the old listing and the new experience is reflected in the new listing.
Okay, that's great. That makes it kind of very clear. Next question. Let's go to Mike again on this one. My clinic merged with another. Google didn't let us merge the GMB listings and force us to create a new listing. We've seen a big drop in rankings and leads. What can we do to rectify this, and what could we have done differently in the first place?
So, I mean, in terms of rectification, it requires you to build up the prominence of the new brand. And so that means you start at the beginning and you do ecosystem-wide citation claiming, you build a strong website, you do good redirects from your old websites to your new website so that you can transfer the prominence of the old website to the new one. And you basically do, meticulously rebuild the brand both locally with press and digitally with all the things that we do in local, from citations to link building to reviews, etc. And you just put one foot in front of the other and start building, right? In terms of what they could have done differently, there's two issues that I see as big issues. One is the name, two is the address, and three is the phone number. I mean, if you plot the name and phone number and address carefully, you can minimize the impact it's going to have. Pick the stronger of the two listings for your new brand, or and move as little as possible and keep the same phone number if possible, right? I mean, there are ways to do this without totally hosing your Google listing, but if you've chosen to, like Joel said before, if it's a new experience, then you're going to have to start, redressing this from the bottom up with a consistent plan of good SEO around the web, at your website, with reviews, with citations, etc.
Right. Joel, anything you want to contribute on this one?
Yeah, just in terms of done differently, like Mike said, there's no probably good reason to be forced to close two listings and create one new one. If you can pick your best listing, and in fact, if you're really subtle about it, you rename both listings, you change the information so they start to match, and then Google will look at the most recent stuff and go, oh, these are the same thing, and then would be more likely to merge them than if you wrote them and said, hey, here's two listings, and here's the new thing I want to name it, and I want you to merge them together. They're just going to go, that doesn't make any sense. But if you change the listings, those edits go through, you can probably subtly get a way to have them merged, depending on the circumstance. But don't talk to Google first. Try to edits that you want first, and then talk to them.
And it should be part and parcel, like I said before, of a larger view of your brand. I don't think it should be isolated to Google. I just think that brand is so important, and brand consistency is so important, because when you rank, we'll talk about ranking next week, but when you're ranking an entity, the brand name of that entity becomes the anchor point, critical both offline and on.
There's a little feedback from Kevin. That was a little background noise.
Somebody playing in a video game?
That was really high pitch, wasn't it? That's a little bit better anyway. I guess, and sort of following off the kind of brand comment, it's also about reputation as well. People who have built up a strong reputation, and we know it can be, some businesses find it hard to get reviews, and they really obviously cherish them when they do get them. I think the big fear is around all that effort and goodwill can go away if this is kind of managed incorrectly. What actually exactly happens, Joel, in that scenario when you said you make two listings look very similar, and then Google makes a logical connection between the two and merges them? Does that merge the reviews for both profiles together as well?
No. You would still have to separately request the reviews to be added to the extant profile.
Okay, fine. So you can do it. It's just a sort of separate step in the process.
Yes.
Okay, great. Let's go to the sort of final section, which is around sort of multi-location businesses or single businesses that have multiple services that they operate out of one location. And let's go with Joel on this one. I have over 100 listings that all use a central order phone number. Google guidelines state that a local phone number must be used. How do companies who are in the same situation approach this?
So my recollection is that Google allows locations where the phone number that's best suited for the location is a shared phone number. So the first example of this where we went back and forth with businesses for a long time. You search Pizza Hut in Australia, anywhere in Australia, it's the same phone number. So it's possible. It can certainly be done. And they do something clever with their phone system that it matches from where you're calling to your closest location, and all sorts of clever things to get you to the right ordering system. But you see this in hotel chains and stuff too, where their phone numbers are essentially rerouted. So workarounds include just creating phone numbers that get routed to a central line, right, if you did want a local phone number. But stating clearly that if you get pushback, certainly when you're doing a bulk verification of a chain, if you get pushback, it might be because your website does have local numbers on it. That would be a mistake. Also, I found that those teams that are doing local bulk verifications don't know all the guidelines very well. So explaining that there's precedent, showing them Pizza Hut of Australia, to say, hey, there's precedent here in case you didn't understand that, and linking to Google's own website so that they understand the policies can help too.
I would add there's one other tactic that can be used, which is used by AT&T cell stores, which do have a local presence, but a lot of the calls coming into the local number are best handled at a national level. They use a sophisticated call tree, right? So the number is local, but it's choice 1 is get your billing update, choice 2 is get tech support, and choice 3 is contact the local location, which is what Google really wants, is they want a person to be able to touch base with that location. I think if you had a call tree that was similar with a central order number, because sometimes it is appropriate to speak to the location, it's another way to handle it. And then if you do it the AT&T way, it's easy enough to get virtual numbers and set up a call tree that does use local numbers, that does give people that access to the local location.
Yeah.
Okay, great. So it certainly has a lot of kind of complexity, but there are a couple of different solutions that the businesses and agencies can take. Next question is, and let's go to Joy for this one. I have clients who run different businesses from the same location. Google insists that each business needs its own address and phone number. Should I advise my clients to create fake suite numbers, or is there a better approach to satisfy Google's rules?
Before Joy answers, I just want to say I hope that before the end of this 10-year period, that we can stop talking about suite numbers as having any relevance to this whole discussion.
Yes. Oh my God. Yeah, I could not say that more, Mike. Suite numbers do not matter for anything. So people often think that they somehow differentiate them. Businesses, they don't. Google does not care about suite numbers other than helping users get to the right place. So if you are in a 20-floor building, absolutely put your suite number. It's helpful. If you're in a plaza that has 3 businesses and they're like ABC, I really don't think you need to add your suite number. That being said, to answer the question, if these businesses are actually different businesses, as in they have different business licenses, you pay taxes separately, you're totally fine. If they're just different brands, so for example, I have a client that's in home security, and he has 3 different distinct brands that he operates, and I asked Google if he was eligible to have listings for each of them, and the answer was no. They're in the same industry. He's not eligible unless he has separate locations, separate staff, separate signage, or it offers a completely separate service and does not overlap when it comes to categories with his existing listing. One example of a business that they do allow this for would be Best Buy. So Best Buy has Geek Squad as a separate brand, and because Geek Squad does different things than Best Buy does, like Best Buy you buy electronics, at Geek Squad you fix electronics. So because they do different things and they have different categories and they have different staff and they have signage, they're allowed. All right, that's kind of a long-winded answer.
Right. The other scenarios where it would be allowed is like a car dealer that has a service department and a regular department, totally different categories, or an oil change department and a service department, and a used car lot. You know, they're staffed by different people, they're different entrances, they may use the same phone, they're still allowed. Or I have an example of a spa, hotel, restaurant. They have 3 businesses, same phone number, but actually takes place in 3 different physical locations at the same address. That would be allowed. I mean, Google is trying to the best of their ability, reflect the real-world experience. And if that real-world experience includes different entrances and different experiences, and as Joy pointed out, critically, a different category, because otherwise it's going to get filtered under POSSUM, then that's fully respectful of Google, and it should work fine. But fake suite numbers aren't going to help one way or the other.
That's great. I think the final question, which we know is actually kind of pretty similar way of looking at the same issue, I guess, is if a business, it's the same business but with different services, targeting different customers, is there a way to set up GMB listings with different categories? And it sounds like categories is one of the kind of key defining points here, not only for POSSUM, but in terms of differentiating the service. Is that right? Ben, I haven't come to you for a while. What's your view on this?
Yeah, so the short answer to this is no. You are not going to want to set up multiple GMB listings just because you have multiple services within your company and you're targeting a different type of demographic. This question actually really is a great last question, because it's going to lead into the next webinar that we're doing next week. Because this really has to, what we're really talking about here is it's almost like a ranking situation, where what you're going to want to do is your primary service, it would be your primary category, and then you could set up subcategories if you wanted to. It might dilute the listing a little bit, but you could set up separate subcategories. You know, your URL should go to the main page of your website. But from there, you should basically be optimizing your website. You should be using things like Google Plus to really teach Google about your business, about the different services, about the different demographics. You should definitely have maybe other landing pages that are on your site that have different types of local schema. You should be absolutely having your citations listing the different types of services, different types of demographics. Mike did a great case study with Yelp before, you know, so get some reviews that are highly accurate to each one of your services and your demographics. And again, I think it goes back to what Mike was talking about, is you're talking about brand consistency at the end of the day. So no, don't create multiple Google My Business listings. They will almost absolutely get suspended. And really just enhance your brand, do good marketing.
Okay, Joel, do you want to finish us off on this particular question?
Yeah, just in general, when you think about a business, and Joy kind of mentioned this, so did Mike, about, you know, you need separate licenses, and really Google in most industries doesn't care if you have a separate license or a separate DBA. It's the customer experience walking through the door. So if I walk into the door, I see the same receptionist, I talk to the same practitioner, I talk to the same real estate agent every time, then that should be one listing, even if that real estate agent does residential and commercial real estate. It doesn't matter. It's the same experience, it's the same person you're dealing with. They might be providing a different service, but that's not really what Google is trying to represent. So when you think about representation, you can get all the DBAs you want at the same address, phone number, and basically under the same category. That's not going to matter to Google. They're going to want to know, what's it feel like when they walk in the door of your business. So try to represent, as Mike said, representing what is real in the offline world online is Google's goal. And so if you bias to trying to follow that, there'll be success. You'll set yourself up for the best success possible on Google.
And I think that is a great way to end it, with that sort of real-world view from. Nice. We've covered off all the questions, so thank you very much. We've overrun by about 10 minutes, but I've certainly learned a lot. I'm sure everyone listening in has learned an awful lot as well. And of course, we are going to do this all again next week. So join us again next Thursday. In that particular session, we're going to be looking at strategy and ranking factors. You can still submit questions via the page on BrightLocal, the blog post. We'll also be posting the recording from today's webinar on the BrightLocal blog tomorrow, and everyone who has registered will get an email with a link to that. So if you weren't able to kind of listen to it, or you want to go back and recap, you'll be able to kind of get access to the video very quickly. So, guys, thank you very much. Oh, sorry, final thing before I go. Joy asked me to kind of mention this. I might have to give us a little bit of a pitch for it. This is something that Joy has put together on her own brand and Local U. It's an incredibly insightful and detailed guide to becoming an expert local SEO. Joy, why don't you give the kind of elevator pitch on this?
Oh, sure, yeah. So Mike, I guess, is technically involved in this too, since Local U is his company. But this is basically a training guide that we came out with and wrote to help people learn more about local SEO. So really mainly written for agencies or SMBs that already have a good grasp of local SEO but are looking for more advanced tactics and things that they can execute that deliver results.
And Joy's very kindly given us a webinar discount, taking 15% off the price of it. My whole team here have read it and have absorbed it a lot, and it has vastly improved our overall understanding of some of the kind of really inner workings of Google and some of the advanced tactics. So I can really recommend it very, very highly. And thanks, Joy, for giving us the discount there. We'll make sure that gets shared out on the emails that go out after this as well. So guys, thank you very much for your time, your insights, and your good humour today. And we're going to do this all again next Thursday at 1 p.m. EST, looking at strategy and ranking factors. And we hope we'll get as many attendees for next week's webinar as well, because that's also going to be a fascinating hour going through that. So this is the end of the webinar, guys. Thank you very much. Thank you for everyone who took the time to attend. We appreciate it a lot. And look out for the following emails. That'll come up tomorrow and also on Friday. Okay, guys. Thanks a lot. Bye.